Today we're going to be doing something a little bit differently. I asked my friend and frequent collaborator, HARGER, if he would do a 5 tips episode on editing. He's an amazingly talented and knowledgeable editor, and I asked him to put together some tips that he thinks that every editor, whether you're just starting out or have been doing it for years, things that you absolutely need to know and do well. But before we get into that, as I've been saying every week and will keep saying, we do have a place below that you can go and donate. Just below this video, you'll find a place you can donate to help feed people who are struggling right now during the whole COVID-19 pandemic we're all going through. And like I said last week, if all you can do is $1, please just do that. If everybody that watched this video donated just $1, we'd be donating tens of thousands of dollars to help people in need. So I understand that everybody doesn't have the means to do that, but if you do, consider donating below. And just as a reminder, the latest stay-at-home challenge is still going on right now. You only have 1 week left until the submission deadline. That's May 7th at 11 p.m. CST for you to get your video in. Again, the prizes are awesome. Links to all of that below. But now with all of that out of the way, let's jump right into it with Lucas.
And now, on with the show.
We're gonna call this Sips for Tips.
Sips for tips.
Tip number 1, organize your damn timeline. That is one thing that I see over and over again from editors of all levels, is a completely disorganized timeline. And it drives me nuts. This is one of the things, all of these tips, honestly, are things that differentiate someone who edits from an editor. And so let's be editors here and not just someone who edits. So tip number 1 with organizing your timeline. It's very simple. And you can even save a sequence and save a project so you don't have to set it up every time. It just is automatically there. You're ready to go. So how I organize the timeline, you don't have to do it the way that I do it, but if you don't do it the way I do it, then you're doing it wrong. Just kidding. Kind of. But you can do it any way that you want. And so the way that I organize my timeline is with these like 3 distinct chunks, and each section is differentiated by locking a layer. And so I have my dialogue on the top, I have my effects in the middle, and then I have my music on the bottom. And then I go one step further and actually name all of the tracks running down the side. You can rename the tracks. And I just do DX, FX, MX, and that kind of groups everything from a text standpoint, which will come into play later on in one of our next sips. And so organize the timeline, break it out. This will help you when you're trying to identify a weird sound you're hearing. This will help you identify if that's in the dialogue track or the FX track. What am I hearing? I need to disable it. Also, when you're doing your final pass, that'll help you as the mixer, or if you're collaborating, it'll help the collaborator just get to the creative stuff quicker. On top of that, I also get into color labeling things. One thing that I see time and time again, which is interesting, is all of the music tends to be labeled mango. And I've always done that as well. And so I make sure all of my music tracks, and so I know exactly what is music. I can, at a glance, understand my timeline. So organize your timeline is a tip number 1. Tip number 2. Use the audio track mixer. So now that we have everything organized by tracks and everything is broken out, you can start to use some submixes where you actually route all of the dialogue to one submix. And then on that submix, you can start putting plugins that will just take a ton of cleanup off of your plate. So I use, what do I use?
What? Acusonos ERA4 bundle, I think?
ERA bundle?
Acusonos ERA4 bundle.
Yeah. I use plugins that do background cleanup and roll off the S's, take care of any clicks and pops, and it just kind of gives me a really good baseline, a really good leveling out of my dialogue track. You can also add in some reverb if you want to get specific with some of your tracks or your submixes. You can start to add in some channel-based reverb, just things that you're finding yourself doing over and over and over again. You can start to apply to several files at the same time just by using the submix and by the work that we've already done in organizing our timeline. Sip 3, please clean your audio. I'm not talking about D-clicks and S's, although do that as well. I'm talking about dips and fades and dives. I see so many timelines that have just really, really crass and really rough audio transitions, audio fades. I never use the normal dissolve fade transition for audio because you can't get super specific with it. It's a video frame, and so you're only working with 1/24th of a second, but with audio you can get so much more precise and so much more dramatic and drastic with cleaning up the ends of your sentences, but also you can fade it down so there's like a nice handoff to silence or to the next dialogue line. And so just take the time to drop the keyframes and take the time to actually fade it the way that it should be faded. Sip 4. What was sip 4? Oh yeah, organization select. So I'm a big timeline-based editor. I don't bin anything. I don't refer back to bins when I'm cutting. That's not where I keep any of my media. Everything has a place on the timeline. And so when I'm starting to go through takes or when I'm starting to go through interviews, put everything on the timeline, organize it into sub-timelines however I feel necessary, and then I start watching it for selects. And so when I'm watching selects, if I find a bit that I like, I'll cut it on both ends of the moment that I enjoy, and then I will elevate it to the next video layer. That way, when you zoom out, you can see all of your selects on a timeline. I never get rid of the media that's between the selects. I don't make select reels because you'll find yourself in the middle of an edit and you'll be in a corner. You don't know how you're going to get out of this issue, and you'll be scrubbing your selects, and all of a sudden there'll be a take that you had no idea you were going to use in this moment for this situation. And if you had just thrown it away, if you had just kind of put it out of sight, you'd have to dig around so much more. And so I like to keep everything in front of me always, but I do like to know what I think is the good take. And then once you've done the work of organizing, once you've done the work of pulling your selects, our next sip will kind of show you how quickly then you can put together your first assembly. Sip 5. Pancake timelines. I'm sure you've seen this on Twitter. I'm sure you've seen it YouTube or Instagram. Stacking timelines is an incredibly useful tool for me, particularly when I am putting together the first assembly. And so I have my selects pulled, they're elevated where they should be, and I'm gonna put my footage and selects timeline on the top, and then on the bottom, I'm gonna put my assembly timeline. Then I'm just gonna run through and just start pulling selects down into my assembly timeline and just creating as quickly as possible that first assembly. Speed is pretty important here. You don't wanna get caught up and pulled down into the bowels of perfection. All you're looking to do is to create an assembly. Editorial is very iterative, and don't spend too much time on that first assembly. Save that for later. Once you see the film and once you see the piece in context with itself, then you can start to create and make interesting decisions, and you can start to throw away not very interesting decisions. And so make that assembly as quick as possible, and the pancake timelines help. And with that, we are out of sips. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got something out of it. Hope you learn something new or can adapt your workflow to be more efficient, effective, and which will then allow you to be more creative. So here's my one last thing that I'm gonna say. Any technique, any workflow should work for you. As soon as you find yourself being a slave to the workflow, as soon as you find yourself bending over backwards to hit the workflow, that's when it's not working for you and you need to modify, adapt, or shift. You should never find yourself spending more time developing a workflow than actually editing. These techniques should liberate and free you to spend more time in the creative process, spend more time actually putting the thing together. And so hope you got something out of these. I'd love to hear what you're doing. Having different inputs into the workflow and opening the conversation is super interesting. And that is one of the things that I talk to other editors about. Second most to narrative and to crafting the story is how you actually do the thing. So enjoy, and we'll see you next time.
Logo.
Big thank you to Lucas for putting all that together. And if you're wanting to learn more about editing or really cinematography, color grading, directing, so many different things, you could jump over to MZ. We've talked about them a lot, but they're an insanely valuable educational resource that you can go and get a subscription to right now. They have over 30 courses. It's something like 200 hours of educational material, and they're constantly adding new educational material from people like Shane Hurlbut, Philip Bloom, Alex ex buono. It's just a wellspring of anything you would want to know, again, including editing. So you can get a subscription there. They're also donating 20% of all sales to Los Angeles Regional Food Bank. So every membership equates to 240 meals going to families, children, and elderly in need in the LA area. So you can get yourself a subscription, educate yourself in filmmaking, and be, again, donating and helping those in need. So win all the way around. Also, like I told you before, the podcast is back, and one of my favorite episodes that we've ever done just went up with Ricky Staub. He's a writer-director that just finished his first feature film, which stars Idris Elba. He's actually been on the show before. He was on talking about how to direct non-actors, talking about his short film, The Cage, back in 2017. And that led to Ricky getting his first feature. So we dive into how he went about the path of getting that feature set up and made, how Idris Elba became attached to it, what it was like to direct someone like Idris Elba for your first feature. He had a lot of really amazing things to say, so definitely check that out in the links below as well. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.